Hey everyone! Welcome back to As a Second Language, the best place to learn English on your schedule. Today we're going to be talking about how to improve your English pronunciation, or any language for that matter, alone at home, all by myself. And that's enough because I don't know anything about copyright and I really don't want to have any issues, but you get the idea. Before we get started, I wanted to say, and if it wasn't obvious already, I love languages. That's why I wrote an ebook called How to Learn Any Language that gives you the framework of how you should structure your language learning from beginning, the most important things you need to do, to the end. And you can get that in the description of this video. If you're stuck at home because you're quarantined, or you're just home because you want to be home, which I totally understand because I'm an introvert. It probably doesn't look like it, but it's true. I totally understand. And you might be wondering, how can I study my English pronunciation from home even when I'm by myself? And if that's the case, keep watching this video because I am going to give you 4 key practices that you can use to improve your English pronunciation from home all by yourself. The first tip that I have for you that has to do with improving your English pronunciation from home is in regard to practicing the endings of your words, specifically the endings of your verbs, okay? Especially when it comes to the past version of verbs, it's really important to be able to over-enunciate that ED sound that we have at the end of different verbs. So, I'm going to give you a tip that I think will help you with those pronunciations, because a common mistake that I see from a lot of different language learners from various backgrounds is that they tend to try and pronunciate that D sound just as a D all the time, or like ED, ed, okay? And both of those are incorrect, okay? And I'm gonna show you why in as brief amount of time as I possibly can. But in order to do so, I'm gonna show you a little piece of paper that I made that is not fancy whatsoever, but will totally make sense, okay? So this piece of paper, boop, 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 okay? I know it's kind of far away, but I'm gonna go through it so you know what I'm talking about, is a list. And as you can see, I have 3, this is not in focus. I'm hoping this is in focus now, okay? There's 3 columns, 1, 2, 3. In the first one, we have T, D, ID, okay? So 3 columns for each sound, all right? If you guys have read my ebook, this one, How to Learn Any Language, you'll see that my first tip for learning any language is to really focus on the phonetics. And this is no different, okay? If you want to improve your pronunciation, one of the biggest things I can tell you is to go back to the basic phonetics of English and really dial down on them. Because if you understand the phonetics of English and blends and all those things, you can totally nail your pronunciation in the best way. All right? So when it comes to pronouncing verbs with ED, there are 3 endings. Like I said, the T sound, T, the D sound, D, and the ID sound, id, okay? Just like I showed you here on this paper, right? I made a list, okay? These are example words that end with the T sound. These are example words that end with a D sound, and these are example words that end with ID, okay? But the interesting thing is all of their endings are ED. So that's where English pronunciation gets a little bit confusing. But if you understand what sounds come before these endings, then you can more easily pronounce them. All right? So I'm gonna give you a list and I'm gonna read them because no, I do not have them memorized, okay? But you can definitely go through and make your own list. And I'm just gonna tell you now, what I want you to do with that after you have your list is to pronounce those words every single day. Because if you get used to those sounds, the second to last sound in the word, moving to the last sound of the word, whether that be T, T, D, D, or ID, id, then when you pronounce other verbs with similar endings, you will pronounce them correctly because you'll be used to that flow. All right? So, T sounds. K, P, S, F, C, H, and SH sounds go to the T sound. For example, asked, dropped, danced, laughed, reached, pushed. And I need you to slow this video down and go back if that didn't make sense to you. But I want you to listen to the second to last sound and also the last sound. In the words I just read, the last sound was T. So all of the sounds that I read go to T. Okay? Second column. This is the big one. The majority of past verbs go from this to the D sound, duh. Okay? But not all of them, so don't get confused. And the sounds that go to D sound are B, G, V, Z, M, N, L, R, vowel sounds, and J. Okay? And I have some example words again. Sobbed, bagged, arrived, amazed, claimed, cleaned, pulled, cleared, cried, lied, emerged. Okay? And remember, when I'm saying the sound goes to this, I'm not saying the letter. I'm saying the sound. So you could have a G that sounds like a J, and the J would go to a D, okay? You could also have an S that sounds like a Z, and the Z would go to a D, okay? But the S sound would go to something else, like T, danced. For example, CE makes an S sound, and it goes to a T sound, st, okay? All right, last column really quickly is the ID column, and this one's super simple to remember. The only sounds that go to ID or id are T and D, okay? So for example, accepted, tid, you hear that tid at the end? Waited, and attended, okay? That's it. Tip number 2 is to break things into syllables, okay? I know that you might feel a little bit silly slowing your words down, but I promise, even if you have to cut your words in half in order to pronounce the whole word, it makes so much more sense to do it that way than to try and rush through it and for people not to hear what you said because you dropped some letters or you forgot to pronounce something. For example, a common word that people make mistakes with is the word successful, okay? A lot of people will say successful, because they're just trying to hurry through the word. But successful is not the word. I might get the grasp of what you're trying to say based on context, but in order to improve your pronunciation, I would slow it down and even break it up into 2 parts. So, successful has 3 syllables, and you can figure out how many syllables are in a word by putting your hand under your chin like this, and you could say successful. My chin dropped 3 times, and I know it feels a little bit silly to put your hand under your chin, and you don't need to do this in public, but at home, when you're practicing pronunciation by yourself, it can be very helpful to pronounce every single part of the word that way. Especially when you're at home, you don't have to be worried about making mistakes, right? Because you're by yourself. And the more you over-enunciate, slow down, and break things into parts by yourself, then when you go out and you have conversations in person with native English speakers or with other people, it comes out more naturally and people are better able to hear what you're trying to say. It never comes out as like robotic as you think it will. I promise. Tip number 3 is to study the phonetics and blends. And I talked about this a little bit with tip number 1, but I want to take it one step further. Before, we were talking about endings and transitions to different sounds, right? But there's something really interesting that you can find out by studying the phonetics of a language. And for example, in English, there are 2 sounds for TH, okay? We have a sound that says things like the, and the TH happens at the front of our mouths. And we have things like throughout that start in the middle of our mouths and move forward. Like, imagine this is your tongue and these are your teeth, okay? When you pronounce the, it happens at the tip. So it's like the tip of your tongue, the, okay? But when you say things like throughout, it starts in the middle of your tongue, throughout. I know this is kind of a weird motion, but I want you to see my face and also this motion, okay? So a lot of people don't know that there are 2 different TH sounds in English, right? Because that's not something you can learn from the alphabet. But it will help you break down your words when you're trying to pronounce THs, whether it's at the beginning, middle, or end of a word, it totally changes. The differences always make me laugh when I slow them down. For example, like the, and throughout. I could go back and forth. It just makes me look really funny. And now I have a question for you. What is the hardest word in English for you to pronounce? I'm really curious. Put it in the description of this video. And finally, my 4th tip is to listen more, okay? I know that might seem counterintuitive to listen in order to pronounce better, but the more that you are listening to native English speakers talking, the more you are getting used to hearing those sounds, their transitions, how they're used, etc. And if you listen, even if you're by yourself, you can mimic people. You can try to say what they're saying. If you want to get technical, you can record yourself and compare them saying something to you saying something and try to push yourself to improve. It really depends on your level, but you can never go wrong with just listening more, whether it be movies, TV shows, podcasts, audiobooks, doesn't matter. It will all help you in the end. If you like this video, make sure you give it a big thumbs up and hit that subscribe button and the bell to get notified every single week when I post a new video. If you thought this was useful, share it with a friend. And as always, I will see you right here next week at As a Second Language. See ya!